The Community Development General Government Housing Committee will come to order. Like to welcome everyone here. It seems like this week, in some cases, some committees have short agendas. What we have, as you know, the general rule is to take the consent agenda first. I'm sure Councilmember Bessie is on his way. And as I speak, he took it.
That could have been playing any better, by the way.
Someone jumped the gun again.
Well, I mean, we were on time.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting.
Yes.
Apparently, whether I'm here or not.
That's right, that's right. I got your back.
Thank you very much. The Vice Chair of the committee has ably started the meeting and will have to tell me what point on the agenda we are on.
At the consent. If there anything on there, any concerns.
Thank you very much.
Just got to
As usual, I will ask whether anyone has come to speak to any of the properties that are listed on this afternoon's consent agenda for action. And if not, we'll proceed to consider them on a single consent motion. If you're here to speak to a particular property, please raise your hand when I read its address. 1029 Louise Road, 1011 Louise Road, 1011 Nancy Lane, 1021 Louise Road, 1023 Louise Road, 3798 High Point Road, 4623 Circle Drive, 1507 Golson Avenue, 1701 Light Street, 1670 Bethania Rural Hall Road. Are there any of these items to be removed by request of a council member or suggestion of the staff? Are there any of the other items to be removed for discussion?
Mr. Chair, if there are no items, I would move for approval of the entire consent agenda.
Is there
Second.
All right, discussion? Hearing none, those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's approved. Thank you. That shortens our agenda considerably. Let's now move to item G1, please.
Resolution approving the commissioning of a centennial art piece and a public art fundraising campaign.
Thank you very much. And introducing this matter on behalf of staff will be, please.
Hi, good evening, Chairman Bessie, members of the committee.
Good evening.
What you have before you is an item that will speak to our desire for a public art piece related to the Centennial Year campaign. As you may be aware, there were several discussions about including a piece of public art, incorporating that into the Centennial Year celebration. And so what you have before you is an item that outlines the process by which we could solicit submissions for a Centennial art piece. What the RFP before you calls for is a Centennial art piece that, among other things, honors the diversity of the community over the last 100 years and honors the contributions of women to the community. Submissions, in terms of the process, the review process, the submissions will be first reviewed by a group of artists and certain designees at the discretion of City Council who can speak to the technical aspects of the submissions, if you will, their soundness, their ability to be displayed outside and sustain elements, continued exposure and things like that to the elements. From that initial review process, 3 finalists will be then forwarded on to full City Council and mayor for final consideration. In terms of the site of selection, we've identified 3 locations in prominent downtown, 3 prominent locations in the downtown area, excuse me, Winston Square Park, Corpening Plaza, and Grace Court. The final resting place, if you will, for the piece of art will be at the discretion, of course, of City Council. The selected artist will receive a sum of $30,000 to realize his or her artwork, and it is anticipated that the unveiling of the selected piece will occur no later than December 1st. That's not the completion by that date, but we're hoping that maybe a mock-up or a maquette of the selected work will be able to be presented and unveiled by December 1st of this year.
Questions or discussion? Was there a recommendation from Finance Committee yesterday? All right, there was, I take it a recommendation for approval, discussion?
Move for approval. Oh, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Raleigh, I know this came up in committee yesterday. Are there any prerequisites for artists who may want to participate in this program?
There are none. This is a very open process. We're looking for submissions from artists who consider themselves professionals, or from folks who just kind of do art as a hobby. We're looking for submissions from everyone.
So anything from the amateur to the professional?
Absolutely.
Everyone's welcome.
Yes, that's what the RP calls for.
Thank you.
Ms. Light?
Get your kids to do an art piece.
Yeah, they could use the money.
Yeah.
College.
I'm sure there's an exclusion here somewhere. And the attorney says yes. Further discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's approved. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Resolution authorizing the development of a program to make Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a participant in the Campaign for Compassionate Cities.
All right. Thank you. I believe you've got at your place a package of background information from advocates for this proposal. I will note by way of background that this has been under discussion for several months and was recommended by the Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission. The resolution that you have in the packet is something I've drafted up that I thought would comply with the council's general policies and standards if it pleases the committee to consider it. And I believe that there are spokespersons here for the concept, and we have two standing up. If you'll come to the podium, introduce yourselves, and give us a brief summary of the background of the project.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bessie and council members. Appreciate your working with us on this. As you know,
And you are, sir?
my name is Jerry McLeese. I live at 851 West 4th Street in
Madam?
And I'm Drea Parker, and I live at 332 Gloria Avenue, 27127.
And are you representing a group of groups today?
We represent Interfaith Winston-Salem, which originated the Compassionate Winston-Salem effort.
Please go ahead.
As you know, there has been not much compassionate effort coming out of our state capital recently, so we feel like we might need to get some going locally. So we're presenting, we recommend this resolution that Chairman Bessie, you've worked on. We feel like this is really a ray of hope for the community. It offers some great opportunity for us as we move forward. The program, the Compassionate City program, started about 3 years ago under the direction of Karen Armstrong, who's a well-known writer, and also Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. Those were the three people who originated this. Started in Seattle with a meeting of about 150,000 people attending, and has grown since that time. And now there are roughly 17 cities worldwide that have been certified as cities of compassion, and there are about 80 others that are in the process of seeking certification. We are among those. Two of them who have not announced their intentions yet are Raleigh and Charlotte. I've talked with both of them, and I really would like to see Winston-Salem be the first in North Carolina to get this certification. Andrea will share with you some of the steps that we're seeing coming up after this meeting and what's ahead for us.
Thank you. Our expectation is that the full city council.
If you could, thank you.
Okay. Our expectation is that the full city council will approve the resolution. We would love it if it would happen next Monday at the city council meeting. Once that happens, we will submit the proposed resolution to Compassion Action Network International, who is the global certifying body, and will recognize Winston-Salem as North Carolina's first city of compassion. After that, late July, we will reconvene a mayor's advisory panel. There's the list of the advisory panel members are in your handouts. Sorry. And from there, we will define the values and behaviors that we will pursue as a city of compassion. On the side note, we have already got a handful of small groups that are initiating acts of compassion and other activities that will be included in the action plan that we will also submit to Compassion Action Network International. One of them is, sorry, I get nervous when I stand in front of people. Yeah, the Love Letters program. We'll be doing that at the end of August after we have our
It's okay.
Take your time.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. I guess
We'll be here.
We
trust
do
me.
it all the time.
Okay, so on August 26th, we hope to have a new, the news conference will be on the August 27th, which the mayor will make the proclamation. But on August 26th, we will have a reception to welcome and, let people know about Compassion Winston-Salem. And one thing I'd like for y'all to know is that one of the doctors at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, he, after he heard our interview this morning on NPR, WFDD, his statement that I wish to share with you is that being a city of compassion will be good for business when you're trying to attract people from around the world to invest their careers in our downtown biotechnology park. Because being a city of compassion is not just a nice thing to do, it sends a message to the world that our city is of the elite cities of the world.
We have, we're looking forward to what we might do. Some people, one person asked if this is just sort of a soft way of approaching something. Well, what we are planning to do is work with businesses in town to get them to look at ways that they can make compassionate workplaces. We're already talking with Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center about things that they may be able to do. Gary Gunderson, whom some of you may know, has expressed a real interest in what we're doing. And we'll be talking with, a number of other places. We're working with the folks in Louisville and Manitoba, Canada, and some other places that have already initiated some of these programs. So we will be using some experience that other cities already have gained. And that's basically where we stand now. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
And the advisory panel that you've listed noted February 27th of this year, I take it that this was a group of folks that have gathered to discuss the concept. And
Yes, we met at the United Way offices February the 27th, and they instructed us, go talk with the council members to make sure the council members agree with this approach. And we've been doing that over the last few months, and we will reconvene this group at the end of July to have them give us guidance on values, behaviors, and structure that we're looking at.
Next steps.
all right, thank you very much. Are there questions for Ms. Parker or Mr. McLeese? Yes, Ms. Adams.
I think this is a wonderful, creative way to get people engaged and involved and to, I don't know, I guess I call it softening the heart. You know, we take for granted every day that it's business as usual. And the world really can't survive like that, whether it's compassionate towards each other, the environment, our neighborhoods, total strangers who are in need. We've gotten lost. And you hear a lot of people say that. We've gotten lost in the past 5 to 10 years in our hearts. And as my mama would say, that's not the way most of us were raised. So I think this is a wonderful idea. I like your action plan that you have, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
Other discussion? Mr. Taylor.
I just want to thank you and everyone who has come with you for coming out and introducing this to the committee and ultimately to the council. I will say that I have supported other resolutions in the past, and I feel that, you know, resolutions are important tools that councils have at their disposal to kind of express the will of a council member or a council at large without necessarily having to use legislation. Again, being a compassionate city, It's very important to myself, very important to the business climate, and to the overall welfare of the city. So I will be supporting this evening, and thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Other discussion? The motion before you would adopt a statement affirming the values on the attached charter for compassion and authorizing Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission to develop and recommend a program of action for pursuing these goals of enhancing care and community for those in need in our city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this would, by our normal course of procedure, appear on next Monday night's agenda. Thank you. Next item, please.
Continued discussion on ordinance amending Chapter B, Section 5-2.7 and Section 5-2.8 of the Unified Development Ordinances to clarify vague and ambiguous language relating to the loss of nonconforming use status, UDO 240, proposal of the City Attorney's Office. This item was remanded to the Planning Board at the May 6, 2013 City Council meeting.
All right, thank you very much. A little background, this did come from the Planning Board to the Council in May. At my request, it was remanded by the Council to the Planning Board with a request to develop some limitations on how long a building permit could hold the non-conforming use status. And a recommendation was developed, has been supported as enforceable by our attorney staff, came through the Planning Board, and Mr. Reed, if you would present, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, yes, the original amendment was primarily to clarify ambiguous language while retaining our longstanding policies that we use for nonconforming uses. It also addressed vested rights. It addressed an accessory use problem that the enforcement folks have had. And it also established a cumulative timekeeping of the discontinuance. And what I mean by that is we put in language so that if someone were to discontinue their use for, say, 10 months and then got a building permit, then they never actually followed through and they let that building permit expire, their time limit would pick up at the 10 months they'd already burned. They wouldn't get another year. And that was added in there for the benefit of neighbors who were waiting for the non-conforming use to go away. The revised amendment still has all of that in it, and it also includes modifications to the section on demolition or destruction of non-conforming uses. That was not addressed in the first go-round, but they're very similar, and we decided to align the time frames in both sections of the ordinance. So that whole section was added into the amendment. And then secondly, the revised one establishes a requirement that if a building permit is issued within 1 year of the discontinuance, then a CO must be issued within 2 years of the issuance of the building permit.
Certificate of occupancy.
I'm sorry?
Certificate of occupancy.
Yes, I'm sorry, a certificate of occupancy. In discussing this among staff as well as with the Planning Board at their work session, we talked about 2 years versus 1 year. There was concern that 1 year may be too short. Somebody starts working on a project, they have a record month of rain like we did last month, or their contractor quits and they have to find another contractor. What happens if that year gets there before they're done? And we talked about maybe we could create an extension process for people who legitimately needed more than a year. But creating an extension has its own headaches. Would you ask for it before or after it expired? Who grants the extension? On what grounds? Is it limited to one or more? And these are just questions we came up with off the top of our head. When you come up with something like that, you sometimes create some unintended consequences. So went back to the idea of letting it be 2 years, and also the fact that there has not been a problem where people have been using building permit extensions to extend their non-conforming use status. It just hasn't been a problem for the enforcement folks. So with that, staff had recommended the Planning Board that the change be made and to allow there to be up to 2 years before they get a certificate of occupancy, and then the Planning Board held a public hearing and voted 8-1 to recommend that revision to the council.
All right, thank you. Questions for Mr. Reed? Ms. White?
Okay, if you're saying, I after demolition of a structure that was,
That was used for a non-conforming use.
so they could, even though building a new structure or whatever, they would still retain the non-conforming use.
Yes. And that's how the rules have been all along.
Yeah, that seems strange though. Okay, all right, thank you.
Just, again, for clarification, this was intended originally as a way of clarifying current practice, and there were a couple of potential problems that were seen, that I saw, with current practice, and the potential for abuse in the rare cases, in particular through a potentially indefinite number of extensions or renewals of a building permit. And the language that came back from Planning Board, the added language is intended to address that potential for occasional abuse. I have seen, not in technically a non-conforming use case, but in another case in a neighborhood I represent, a situation in which a building permit has been renewed and renewed and renewed and created difficulties for the neighborhood in the process. Further questions or discussion? This is on our agenda for consideration of whether we want to make a recommendation to council on this. Ms. Adams.
Just for clarification, on page 12, where it says in the last paragraph, the proposed time limitation is 2 years from the time the building permit is issued, which then extends the total possible time to reestablish a discontinued non-conforming use to 3 years. But at the beginning, wasn't the 2 years, wasn't that the main timeline that seemed to be discussed throughout, and then at the end, you get this 3-year thing?
Well, the original amendment said that within 1 year, you have to get a building permit. Once you have that building permit, then it was open-ended, where someone could keep that building permit alive for a long time. So this is in response to some neighborhood concerns and Councilmember Bessie's concerns about limiting that, putting a limit on how long you can keep a building permit.
Yeah, a single building permit normally lasts for how long?
Well, once it's issued, there has to be an inspection done, and then after that, if progress is being made, it's not a finite time. It's just, they have to just keep making progress.
So the original form in which it came to council would have not had a limit
Right.
on what could happen with building permit. As it is, all the limits that you have with building permits would continue to apply, but there's also a 2-year absolute cutoff from whenever you get the building permit.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Adams?
Yeah, one more comment. When you also listed that we're being more lenient than the other cities in North Carolina that's like us, per se. I guess my question is, why wouldn't we just go and benchmark them, or are we trying to ease our people into it, the citizens into this?
Well,
Because we're changing it.
actually, as we looked at that further, the ordinances in the other cities, 5 cities we looked at in North Carolina, all of their limits that seem more restrictive than ours are really tied to when the building is demolished or destroyed. And they are silent when it's simply an abandonment of the use. So we're actually, by putting this 2-year on here, we're actually being more restrictive, because we're no longer being silent about that, which is what our ordinance used to read, where you just, once you got a building permit, you could keep it going. So the other cities actually, in that regard, we're becoming more restrictive.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tate?
Thank you. Mr. Reed, before you sit down, I just want to make sure I've got it together. Now, this process would cap the process at 2 years.
It would cap keeping a building permit alive, and if you
Consistent.
haven't reopened, then it would be 2 years, and then you have to get a CO from that building permit with 2 years, or your use is no longer legally non-conforming. You've lost your use.
But you mentioned a little bit about the extension process, and I thought you brought up some excellent questions. Now, it appears that the extension process will still be in place past 1 year.
Well, actually, what we did was, in discussing the extension, what I was listing is all the problems we thought there would be with one, so we did not want to establish an extension. We simply would leave it as, you have up to a year, if you abandon the use, you have up to a year to apply for a building permit. Then if you use that whole year, then from that point, when you get that building permit, you have to have a CO, or certificate of occupancy, within 2 years after you got the building permit, or your non-conforming use is over. And so you really, the possibility of the longest amount of time they could have is 3 years. But we did not put in any kind of extension language because it just became too cumbersome to say how would we orchestrate that.
Attorney Carmen has clarification.
Right. The statute really doesn't authorize us to put a limit on the number of times a building permit can be extended. So we had to look at the certificate of occupancy. So that's the route we chose. Basically, it has to be issued within 2 years after you get the building.
Okay,
Accomplishes the same thing.
So the language of the code now doesn't speak to the question of extensions.
Right.
That was something that was discussed as a way to approach the issue, but it was not taken because of legal problems in the enforceability of that. It was like,
Confused every time we talk. Okay, we're talking about non-conforming uses.
Yes.
And, okay, I understand what we've been talking about if it has to be demolished or if a lot of, building has to be done, then you go into the 1 year and 2 year scenario. What if we're talking about, for example, we know of a restaurant that was closed, it's a non-conforming use, and it stayed closed for over a year, and yet somehow, was able to go back to being that non-conforming use. I guess what I'm confused about is if you don't have to get a building permit at all, if you're just going back into using structure for the same non-conforming use, how long do you have?
1 year.
1 year.
And I think what happened, if we're thinking about the same restaurant, is that building permits were issued, but the neighborhood and a lot of people, including myself, didn't really understand how that actually allowed for the extension.
Even though they didn't, well, they may have had to have gotten building permits.
And there's also an element of when the inspections office can prove that they abandoned the use.
Uh-huh.
So that sometimes it gets to be longer than a year simply because it's not clear, like they didn't just shut off the electricity on a certain day and that's when they abandon it. Sometimes it's kind of like people call in, is that abandoned? They start looking into it and they don't know when it really happened.
And progress was being made in terms of the work. It was slow, but it was being made. So basically, I think that's what happened.
the practice and the legal interpretation heretofore of what has been permitted to extend the period of survival of non-conforming use was that if you got a building permit for restoration of that non-conforming use, within a year of the time that you've been able to establish that the use was abandoned, that the non-conforming use was alive so long as that building permit was alive, with no cutoff date at all, period. So this codifies the practice with some important limitations that have not existed before, including the 2-year absolute limit on that building permit's lifetime. If you haven't gotten the certificate of occupancy within 2 years after you get the building permit, and you have to have gotten the building permit within 1 year after the abandoned use, the maximum time is that 3-year period, maximum theoretical time. That's not going to be common, one presumes. But that's a cap. Presently, we do not have a cap. Okay. Further discussion? Mr. Taylor.
I just want to add very briefly that we had a similar situation to occur on Clemensville Road.
That's what we have.
And, I know this has happened in other areas, but I'm glad it adds some clarity to the UDO. And, Mr. Chairman, if there is no additional discussion, I would make a motion to approve this item.
Okay, so this is, moved and seconded that we recommend this in its present form then to the council. And would that come to the first meeting in August?
We'll verify that.
Okay, well, whenever it comes, if there's enough time for public notice between,
This supposed to be advertised, so it'll probably be that first meeting in August, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
all right, so, right, so presumably then the first meeting in August, if we're counting the days wrong, then whenever it can come up, the first meeting in September, if not in August, but presumably at this point, first meeting in August. And it will be a public hearing at that point. If there's no further discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? That's approved. That concludes the preset agenda. Let me say at this point that we are all glad as a committee and staff to have Councilmember Adams back
Hear, hear.
with us.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And one item that I want to bring up, I have been the representative of the council on the supervisory commission for the 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. I've also recently taken on some additional committee roles representing the council. I'm looking for some help, someone who would like to take the spot representing the city on the homelessness commission. It meets about once a month. Its next meeting, though, will not take place until September 20. It would be ideal to have another member of this committee in that spot. Give it some thought, please, and let me know after the meeting if anyone is interested in doing that. Pardon?
When do they meet?
The meetings are scheduled by the commission itself. They typically are 8 on a weekday morning, which I know is not my favorite.
Yeah, that's me.
But,
That's
the morning folks find that to be amenable. Or you could get in there and advocate for change time. All right, other business to come before the committee. If not, we're adjourned.